The topic of this study is to explore if astrology correlates with different personality types. This area is of interest to me due to the idea that astrology has the ability to predict future daily life aspects or can be used to explain why a person acts the way they act. In addition to this, astrology poses an interest in that it uses solely the location of planets to make these predictions. This research study is important to the field of psychology because it assesses an issue, while already covered in past studies, can prove to introduce new data that can be proved credible through this study. The common themes and trends within this topic of research are history of astrology, personality versus astrology, and health versus astrology. History of astrology. The history of astrology is important in this study as it dates back to ancient times where the Egyptians developed astrology and the Babylonians later used their idea and were later credited for astrology. This was then introduced to the Greeks as many Greek philosophers studied astrology and considered it an extremely reliable science held in high regard. It became more commonly accepted throughout many societies as astrology was used to predict the weather forecast, war, and other various human affairs. It was also used in a lot of counseling for ancient royalty as kings and queens noticed how useful it was. Most historical information will come from the American Federation of Astrology. Personality versus astrology. There have been multiple studies closely relating the ideas of astrology and the zodiac signs having an effect on a person's personality. In the Journal of Psychology, 366 college students were analyzed to see if there was a correlation between their zodiac signs and different personality traits. They found a consistent pop-up of the Barnum effect, which deals with the phenomenon that people believe that what they are told about themselves if it is based off something like a horoscope, although these predictions are targeted for a large group of general people. From another study done by the Journal of Clinical Psychology, researchers found a very little correlation between personality in relation to birth date and planetary position. A separate study analyzed if different zodiac signs had an effect on a person being introverted or extroverted. What they found was that there was no apparent correlation making a difference. Most all studies done regarding astrology and personality are found to be inclusive in finding a positive correlation between the two. Health versus astrology. While most people only think astrology has an effect on personality, there have been studies conducted to see if there is any type of correlation between astrology and health. A study done analyzed how astrological signs affected the outcome of elective spine surgeries. This study was started because patients would choose specific days to get their surgeries based off the planetary positions that day. The results showed that the patients who were operated on during waxing moons were more likely to have post-operative complications than those operated during different moon phases. It is also important to note that patients who were operated on during Leo season were unaffected by the variables and did not show neither an increase nor a decrease in the effect of the surgery. A clinical nursing study aimed to analyze how astrology can have an effect on a person's health, as certain signs correlate with different areas of the body and/or certain organs. This has not yet been conducted to prove this theory. Methods. The study looked at whether or not participants had past knowledge on astrology. Similar to a correlational study, ex post facto research allowed the researcher to look at characteristics while making a clear line between the dependent and independent variable. Unlike experimental research, the researcher did not manipulate any variables to receive results. This has led the researcher to believe in the Barnum effect, which is described as a psychological phenomenon where people are led to believe that certain personality descriptions are tailored specifically for them, when they are really directed towards a wide group of people. The researcher hypothesized that the Barnum effect is real and is showed throughout the research of when people who believe in astrology have a very biased opinion regarding their personality and zodiac traits. The researcher will be very shocked to see if there is a correlation between personality traits and astrology with people who have no past knowledge on this subject. This study had surveys as well as required each individual to take a widely used Myers-Briggs personality assessment. After this, a randomly selected group of participants were interviewed for a deeper, more honest perspective. The survey the researcher was used to acquire information from a sample regarding characteristics, opinions, and attitudes. A population of no less than 20 men and 20 women between the ages of 15 and 25 in my county. By requiring participants to take an online survey of my making, a paper personality test, and a face-to-face interview. This determined if there is a correlation between these characteristics. The most effective and highly rated method, face-to-face interviews, will be useful in that the researcher was able to record how each participant reacts to my questions, taking into account attitude, body language, and facial expressions. By providing each portion of the study to all participants, this gets rid of a low return rate of data. Sampling bias will be difficult to avoid due to the inability of travel, which forced to sample people in the area via work or school. The expert advisor supervised to make sure there is no researcher bias during the study. Results. In the results section, I will talk about how my personality assessment was distributed, which was online. And I also talk about what I used, which is the Myers-Briggs personality assessment. And I also talk about which personality signs I matched with the astrological signs. I also talk about the survey questions I used and what type of questions I used, and the results of the survey, who I interviewed, and the questions asked in the interview and where the interviews took place, and then what results showed up throughout the interviews and surveys, and whether or not my hypothesis was correct or incorrect.